Hey guys, it has been a while since I've done a Greymane video. Greymane's kind of been a little bit untouched compared to a lot of other heroes in the game. And he kind of fell out of the meta for a little bit when heroes like Cassia were really strong. And even so with like Vala gaining her priority, even during the time that like Sylvanas had a lot of priority, Greymane fell down and was only really picked when there was nothing else available. But I did want to point out that Kepi tends to put a higher priority on Greymane, and Storm actually just generally puts a higher priority on Greymane. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why they put such a high priority on Greymane and what he brings to the table that maybe some of the other heroes that I had mentioned earlier don't bring to the table. So let's first talk about what Greymane does differently in the grand scheme of things. Greymane, compared to Cassia, does two major things. I guess three technically, but he doesn't have the poke that she has. He doesn't have the survivability that she has. He doesn't have the self-healing that she has. They both have similar damage numbers, but where Greymane pops ahead is in camp clear. Greymane pops ahead in the ability to kill tanks, and specifically the targets that he wants to. And Greymane also pops ahead in just the focused damage where you want it to go, when you want it to go. So even if you don't go bullet to take out Diablo, Cassie would have a pretty hard time taking out someone like a Tracer, because Cassia can't really reliably land Qs on Tracer, so she's left with just auto attacks. Well, in pure auto attacks, Greymane does more damage than Cassia does. But beyond that, if you need burst damage, all Cassia can really do is potentially throw an ult, a Surge of Light, or maybe a Fend, and throw the Fend in there and hope for the best. But a Greymane has the potential of using his E, his Q, an auto attack weaved in between those, as well as a go for the throat, which can be a very significant burst of damage. Allowing you to really dish out a lot of damage into someone who can evade a lot, because you have two different ways to dive onto them that are point and click, and one extra way to dive onto them that's not. Then after all of that, you have another way to continue to gap close onto those targets. So Greymane, while he has less survivability than Cassia, sometimes he is a priority when you need to do wave clear, like what we just saw. They were able to get waves done much faster than the opposing team. And also, he could be a higher priority when you need more point and click or focused damage onto targets, rather than just overall damage. That can be good if, again, highly mobile heroes like Sylvanas or Tracer are on the opposing team, or if you just need bullet for your team. So there are a lot of reasons to take Greymane over other people, but what I will say is that he does kind of require a good presence on your team. Your team does need to pay a little bit more attention to him than someone like Cassia. What I mean by that is Cassia has a lot of self-healing in most of the builds that you would go, where Greymane has almost no self-healing. So if you are going to be playing a Greymane, I don't often recommend him too often for Storm League, because you might feel underwhelming and you might feel at risk because you don't have that extra healing. Now, one of the strategies that is I've seen most popularized by Mike Udall is first objective of the game on Greymane, because he has such high siege damage, to ignore the objective and to instead focus on just sieging a side lane. In this particular case, he's sieging a side lane, but the enemy Tracer was already down in bot lane, and the Brightwing showed up as well. And so where his team could potentially win because the opposing team doesn't have a healer there, his team doesn't have a healer either. And so both teams will probably just stall out the objective. It was a risk that sometimes you have to attempt, but doesn't always pay off. Keep in mind also that Kepi is South Korean. He is in South Korea, and so his ping will sit a little bit higher than yours might on your region. I think he said that average ping, or at least when I was talking to the Korean players, they were saying that average ping in North America is probably about 150-ish. But it also fluctuates a little bit more just because of the distance. So what that means is, even if you got used to 150, it might not always be 150. It might move from 150 to 200-ish. So as we start reaching the mid game, you're going to notice that early game, it was all camps. That was the priority. The objective didn't even really matter that much. In fact, the same objective is still the one that everyone's fighting over. And you see that he just made sure that he could push out bot lane, and now he's going back to camps. So the early portions of the game as Greymane is focused on camps. You handle camps really well, and that's something that you want to focus on. Let's talk a little bit about the talents that Kepi goes on Greymane, and then I might give a couple recommendations for people who want to shift their talents a little bit. So, level 1, he takes Viciousness. This is the meta talent, and ultimately I think that they should take the second line of this and just make it baseline, because it's to the point that most people just don't want to take any talent other than this one. Viciousness increases Inner Beast duration to 4 seconds. Inner Beast is naturally 3 seconds, but then it also makes it to where ability damage also refreshes the duration. Cool part about this means that you can do your W, and let's say you can't hit someone with your W, you can throw out your cocktail, hit something, and it resets the cooldown. It's neat, definitely helps out. Level 4, he goes Insatiable. He's probably the only Greymane in the pro scene that goes Insatiable. Inner Beast causes basic attacks to restore 10 mana. And I'm not really a big fan of this talent. I think that it's better to learn better mana management than take talents that could be used kind of more as a crutch. Most people recommend Thick Skin or Eyes in the Dark, depending on the opposing team. Quicksilver Bullets is the meta pick for the pro scene. Wizened Duelist puts a target on your back and also is just generally risky, where Quicksilver Bullets is the least risky talent on this tier and allows you to have the most consistent damage. Not the most damage, but the most consistent damage. Level 10, he goes for Go for the Throat, and this is where we're going to see that jumping on people like Tracer and Sylvanas. He does end up using Go for the Throat onto Cure when Cure used his ult. I would say that's probably a ping issue. He probably ulted when he saw the skull pop up, but then Cure was able to get that ult out. So I like this game because it shows the enemy team kind of dominating. His team was able to stay in the game because of camps. He was able to get boss very quickly because he's playing Greymane. He was able to get the camps for his team and keep them in the game. But they're down by 4 kills, and they're down by 2 of the tributes so far. So as we start going into level 13, level 16, level 20, it becomes a little bit more standard in the builds, to the point that I actually wouldn't mind if Greymane had a bit of a shakeup in his talent tree. Generally, people at level 13 take On the Prowl. As long as Inner Beast is out for longer than 3 seconds, you get a flat 30% movement speed as long as Inner Beast continues. That is mount speed that you can take without being mounted at all times, as long as you can keep your W going. And we have talents to try to keep our W going even longer. Level 16 is definitely a little bit more situational. If you have the opportunity, Alpha Killer is really good at taking out people like Diablo, but the standard meta is generally Executioner, as you can use Executioner to deal extra damage to targets that are slowed. Standard team comps are going to have enemies slowed almost the entire time. The reason why the level 16 talent, and we can see the value of Go for the Throat coming out, allows you to get into the fight a little bit better and potentially get out. They were able to lead to the Sylvanas kill and still apply a lot of pressure. We can see that he's getting a lot of free shots off on the enemies, forcing them to use their heals and giving his team a little bit more time to react. But they've decided they're just going to give up this this tribute. Actually, looks like they're going to poke a little bit longer. So early game, you focus on camps, focus on wave clear. As you reach the mid game, you're going to be wanting to look at getting the most possible damage off during fights in the safest manner. Meaning stutter step and do what you can to prevent the enemies from really jumping on you, and looking to, again, continue moving around a little bit, getting those free shots off where you can. Level 13, again, we see that On the Prowl, a pretty meta pick to for just about any Greymane player. Again, another talent that it would probably be better to give a little bit of a shake up, make more competitive talents on this tier. He jumped in with his E first. He does not have his ult this time around, so he tried to get in the bunker and then backed off, but he wants to get some extra shots. He doesn't have his W going anymore, and so he just wants to try to take him out as fast as possible. Sanctification, shields really helped keep him up, as well as extra heals. You could see he had the shield for a good portion of that fight, and kind of why I come back to Storm League. He's probably not going to be the most fun to play. if you don't have like a dedicated healer and a tank that's just making sure that you stay alive the entire time. As we start approaching level 16, the reason that you don't see Eager Wolf very often, especially in the competitive scene, is because the earlier the damage comes out in a fight, the higher chance you have to win that fight. If you do a lot of damage early on, you might have killed a couple targets, but if you take 4 seconds before you get value out of the talent, then you lose a lot of value. Eager Wolf requires your W to be going for 4 seconds before you get more attack speed. Attack speed itself isn't even as valuable as regular shots, because if you do a bigger shot, it's better than having another shot come a little bit faster after. Where Eager Wolf does gain value is that it is more siege damage, and it is more boss and wave clear and camp clear. Because attack speed triggers on everything, where Executioner only triggers on heroes, Alpha Killer only triggers on heroes. And so Eager Wolf is pretty rare when it's going to be more valuable than the other two talons, because during team fights, the first 4 seconds in a competitive fight is sometimes the most important 4 seconds in that entire fight, because that's where the most damage is going to go out, that's where the most CC is going to happen, and that's when you want to have that damage out. So Executioner and Alpha Killer are definitely more valuable. If you want to go the safe route, Executioner. If you're going to play a little bit more aggressive, like in this case with the Sanctifications out there, Alpha Killer is a lot more viable of an option, because you can jump in, hit the Diablo, Sanctification goes out, and you're safe within there just doing % health damage to the Diablo. So I can see him take either talent at that tier. And then when we get to level 20, the safe option is Blunderbuss. But we will, in rare scenarios, see Tooth and Claw if we are going more of that Worgen form with things like Sanctification. And in some rare scenarios, we'll see Unleashed. Go for the throat's damage is increased, and if you get a kill, it resets all of your abilities, so you can really jump around fights. But generally, the safe option would be to take On the Prowl, Executioner, and Blunderbuss, as well as Quicksilver. That way you can safely shoot at people from really far away, and all of your shots will do AoE damage. We see Tracer jump in, and we see him kind of figure out where the Tracer is going to go. And then he decides to kind of jump in on the Tracer. Doesn't use his ult yet, does get cleansed, so that he doesn't need to worry about the enemy's polymorph and potentially a Black Arrow. Or Wailing Arrow, actually. Level 16, we can see the talent he went with was Alpha Killer. Again, most of the time you don't really want to go for this talent because of the risk, but in this case with Sanctification, it's definitely an easier option because you're a lot safer in that melee range. The enemy Tracer was able to steal the curse away, but their team has another boss that's just naturally pushing because of that extra clear. The boss on the opposing side is pushing top, so they want to go clear it. And again, this is where Greymane can be very, very good. You can clear bosses very, very quickly. When you're in Worgen form, you do Worgen form with Inner Beast going, you do more DPS than most heroes in the game. And so being able to use that DPS to take down bosses, take down camps, and also potentially take down structures is really valuable. With all of that being said, this game is getting close to closing out, and the opposing team still has a lead this game. Only a lead of 1 kill and lead a little bit of the objective, but where the real value comes in, he used his ult to take out 1 target. As the silence ended, he used his ult to take out the second target. The first target was his E to use the kill, ult to kill the second target, and then he used his ult to jump back up to the third target and kill that target. With that, and this is exactly what I said is the reason why you would take Greymane over Cassia, is you have that ability to pick the targets you want to do the most damage to and take them out. And from there, you have the highest damage, highest single target DPS, or one of the highest single target DPSs in the game. And so now you can simply jump onto the core and do that high single target DPS, and it can be increased by the extra attack speed given by the Tyrael. And so if you do ever find yourself in an opportunity as Greymane where you've wiped the enemy team or at least killed 3 or 4 of them, if you guys have an open keep, you guys can go right to that keep and drop them, specifically after level 20. If you're playing Greymane and you have a tank and a healer, or even just a tank that has enough self-healing to survive the core, and and you wipe the enemy team, you can generally end the game from most board states or map states because of your high single target damage. So let's go over the build one more time that he decided to go with. He took the kind of the standard options at 1 and 7 for going a safe build. Generally, if you're going a safe build, you would be taking Eyes in the Dark. That way you can disengage and disappear for a second or two. Makes it hard for someone like a Sylvanas to target you and take you out, since all of her abilities require you to be visible to target you, or at least most of them. And then he took Quicksilver, allowing him to be a little bit safer in in human form. He went Go for the Throat, so he had extra burst potential when taking out very mobile targets like Tracer, which this ended up being one of the deciding factors in this latest fight, even though they were behind up until this fight. Being able to pick the right target at the right time to lead to a kill was very beneficial. On the Prowl is just the meta talent for the competitive environment. Unfettered Assault is a little bit better for clearing camps, but by level 13, camps should not be the highest priority. You saw early game, priority was camps, wave clear. Mid game was looking for opportunities to siege and looking for safe team fights. As we reached late game, it was looking for specific targets in team fights and to close out the game. And so there was that. Alpha Killer, I think he picked primarily because he had that Sanctification on his team. If you don't have someone as dedicated, I would recommend Executioner for a little bit of a safer option that keeps you in human form a tad bit longer. And at level 20, Hunter's Blunderbuss is usually picked up. There are a few things. Bullet can be interchanged with Go for the Throat if your team comp is playing more front to back, meaning that their goal is to kill the front line, then kill kind of the middle, and then kill the back line. If you're going Go for the Throat, it means that you probably aren't going to try to kill their front line. It's really hard to kill a Yrel. It's really hard to kill a Diablo. So instead, they decided to just jump past with all 4 of these heroes. And then they would either use Bunker or they would use Sanctification to survive the counter engage. So they would jump in, kill a target, Sanctification, and then try to kill another target. And so with this team comp, they did not play front to back. They played back to front. And so in a standard comp, I think this build would be a little inefficient. I would recommend adjusting that build. I also didn't see him ever having mana below 40% that he needed to get his mana back. So I would, again, not recommend this talent too often. And I know people in the comments are going to say, well, he didn't have mana that low because he did take this talent. I'm sure there was probably a moment where he kind of needed this, but we could probably go through and check it. And there just wasn't as many areas where this is as worth it as being able to go invisible or be able to get that extra physical armor. Physical armor against Tracer sure isn't that valuable, but having that invisibility would be pretty strong against both Tracer and against Sylvanas, especially if Tracer didn't go Tracer rounds at level 1, which we can see that Tracer did not go Tracer rounds at level 1. And so because Tracer didn't go Tracer rounds, then he doesn't need to worry if he goes stealth. So, with all of that being said, hopefully this explains why the pros decided to take such a high priority on Greymane, especially on a map like this, is because it was a map that the early camps are worth a lot, the boss is worth a lot, and getting high siege damage with those objectives is worth quite a bit as well. The extra single target made it a very strong option into the opposing team, specifically into the Tracer and the Sylvanas. And that is why in this particular case, Storm took Greymane. With all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching and feel free to check out future videos.